Over the last 25 years since its end, the 90s wrestling boom of the Monday Night War has been defined by three promotions: the WWF, WCW, and ECW, and rightfully so. Those three promotions were the main players. But hidden behind those major promotions are dozens of smaller stories. Promotions that never reached national television. Companies that never sold out the big arenas. But promoters who still risked everything, set up a ring anywhere, and chased a dream. And few stories embody that spirit better than Bert Prentice. Starting with little more than a wrestling ring and a grudge against a promoter, Prentice built a regional wrestling empire that stretched across multiple states, produced television seen across the country, became one of the largest members of the National Wrestling Alliance, and for a brief moment stood as perhaps the most visible and successful independent wrestling promotion in America. This is Defunct Championship Wrestling Episode 33, the story of Ozark Mountain Wrestling, North American All-Star Wrestling, Music City Wrestling, and the man behind them all, Bert Prentice. Long before he became a promoter, Bert Prentice was practically born into the wrestling business. Prentice was born in 1958 as the youngest of 10 children. His mother worked box offices for AWA promoters throughout the Midwest. By the age of 6, he was already helping at wrestling events by selling photos. At 11, he was ring announcing. And by 14, he was refereeing matches. Most wrestling fans spend their early fandom enjoying the show, but always trying to figure out how it all worked. Bert never had that experience. He was smartened up to wrestling at an incredibly young age. In later years, he would express regret about that fact. He felt he never got to experience wrestling as a fan. There really wasn't a time where he could get lost in the illusion and sit back and enjoy the show. He was always on the inside, always part of the business. As he got older, Prentice transitioned into various additional behind-the-scenes roles, before eventually finding his way on screen. In 1983, he arrived in Joe Blanchard's Southwest Championship Wrestling. Originally, he was brought in to write the programs, but plans, as they often do, changed. Soon he was handed a manager spot and given a new name, Christopher Love. The character became his primary wrestling persona throughout the 1980s. A fat guy with a loud mouth, Christopher Love allowed Bert Prentice to become an easy-to-hate heel. Most notably, he was paired with Tully Blanchard during Tully's rise through his dad's promotion. Eventually, Prentice landed in Memphis. And if there was one thing Memphis wrestling always needed, it was villains. Managing a revolving cast of monsters, maniacs, and hired guns, he spent years helping create opponents for the King of Memphis, Jerry Lawler. His time in Memphis proved to be a valuable experience. Being at the studio every week, Prentice learned how wrestling television was produced. He learned how to promote even the smallest of towns. And he learned what drew money and what didn't. And these lessons would be put to use sooner than maybe Prentice expected, because by 1994, Bert was about to become a promoter himself. Every wrestling promoter has a reason for running their own shows. They all have their own origin story. For Bert Prentice, it started over $20. In July of 1994, Prentice was working a show promoted by Eddie Marlin for the USWA. During the match, he suffered an ankle injury. The bout had been scheduled for 8 minutes, but because of the injury, the wrestlers cut it short by roughly 3 minutes. Afterwards, Prentice went to collect his payoff. His expected guarantee was $40. Instead, Eddie Marlin handed him half of that, $20. Prentice was furious. And he wasn't the only one. Another wrestler on the card, Colorado Kid Mike Rapata, had also been shortened on his pay. For both men, it was the final straw, and at intermission, they quit. That night, Prentice and Rapata spent hours discussing what to do next. The conversation eventually turned towards something neither man had really thought possible before. What if they started their own promotion? The next day, Prentice drove to Jonesboro, Arkansas. The town happened to be one of Eddie Marlin's regular USWA stops. If there was ever a place to challenge the big dog of Memphis, this was it. After days of Jerry Lawler trying to smooth things over and get Prentice back to work, the decision had been made. Bert Prentice was going to start his own promotion. There was just one problem. He had no money. No savings, no investors, no nothing. Just a wrestling ring and a dream. In August 1994, Bert Prentice officially began organizing Ozark Mountain Wrestling. Like many independent promotions, the company started small. Very small. Prentice wasn't trying to compete with the WWF or WCW or anyone really, except for maybe Eddie Marlin. By October 1994, Ozark Mountain Wrestling was ready to run its first events. Prentice immediately demonstrated something that would define his entire promotional career. He was willing to think outside the box. Most promoters relied heavily on ticket sales. Prentice decided to do the exact opposite, at least at the beginning. For the first month of Ozark Mountain Wrestling's existence, admission was free. Instead, Prentice made money everywhere else. He charged for photos with Colorado Kid, set up and sold his own concessions, sold other cheap little gimmicks that once all totaled together actually brought in more money than if he'd had charged $10 a ticket for a 30-person house. The idea of getting into the show for free drove people to spend money on the extra shit. It was an unconventional strategy that you really only see maybe for charity shows or part of a larger event like festivals. But for a promotion just starting out with limited resources, it was brilliant. Prentice focused on the smallest Arkansas towns first, trying to stay under the radar. He wasn't interested in attacking USWA immediately. Instead, he wanted to build momentum town by town, fan by fan. Eventually, Ozark Mountain Wrestling expanded to 3 and sometimes 4 events per month. And Prentice promoted those shows the old-fashioned way, with flyers all over town hoping word of mouth would spread. It was the method that had built and sustained wrestling territories for decades. Before long, OMW was running regularly in Jonesboro, Wynne, Paragould, West Memphis, and Harrisburg, and numerous surrounding communities. The promotion was growing and the next step was obvious: television. In February 1995, Prentice landed a 30-minute TV slot with KAIT Channel 8 out of Jonesboro, Saturday nights at 11:30. The show was pretty good. There's nothing that jumps out as particularly must-see or innovative, but it's fun southern wrestling with fun characters. In fact, from the very first episode, Prentice made that point clear, really driving home that Ozark Mountain Wrestling is the wrestling that their grandmas and grandpas grew up watching. The way it should be. You knew that line was coming.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for letting us come into your living rooms this afternoon. You know, for years and years and years, wrestling fans have asked me throughout the arenas, where have all the good television wrestling programs gone? Well, ladies and gentlemen, most of them are dead and gone. But we're going to bring a great wrestling show to you, you great fans in the Jonesboro wrestling area, every Saturday night at 11:30. Ozark Mountain Wrestling premieres March 4th, Saturday night at 11:30. You can now tune in to this great Channel 8 every Saturday night and see hot wrestling action produced right here in Arkansas.
The show also emphasized something else: the community Ozark Mountain was building. They also used the first episode to show how much fun fans have at OMW events. They try to drive home that your friends and neighbors are already enjoying Ozark Mountain Wrestling, so why not you? And OMW made it easy to come out for events, with tickets being $6 and kids getting in free with a paying adult. The television roster featured an impressive mix of veterans and future stars: Tracy Smothers, Tommy Rich, the Spiders, who would later become the Headbangers, Colorado Kid, Mike Rapata, and perhaps most importantly, Cactus Jack. Mick Foley was already one of the most charismatic, notorious, and in-demand performers in wrestling, and Prentice clearly understood what he had. Throughout many episodes, Foley received extensive promo time. While other wrestlers cut short interviews, Cactus Jack was allowed to talk seemingly as long and as often as he wanted. And obviously, Mick is captivating no matter the setting.
That I sit here with scars over every part of my anatomy, with a brain that only works part of the time. But during those parts when that brain functions, I remain very skeptical. Skeptical of people who haven't paid their dues. Skeptical of people that everyone assumes is going to be the next big thing. Because I got very skeptical of the next big thing. Do you remember boxing's Dwayne Bobbitt? I didn't think so. And why is it for every artistic genius like Billy Joe Shaver that remains in obscurity, somebody like Billy Ray Cyrus gets all the headlines, all the attention? See, I don't mean to sound bitter because I've had my shares of successes and I haven't really toiled in obscurity because I've been pretty well recognized. But everybody likes to throw a label on somebody. This guy's the next big thing. In wrestling, we're good guys and we're bad guys. Well, not Cactus Jack. You see, I'm not a good guy or a bad guy. No, I prefer to think of myself as something like a policeman. No, even better, something like a garbage man in professional wrestling. Because there's garbage all around us.
Another charming aspect of OMW television that you don't really see, especially nowadays, was its sponsorship integration. Rather than hiding local advertisers in the background or as a quick shout-out during the show, they became part of the show. Local business owners were acknowledged and interviewed on air, like Betty Morton from Betty Morton Auto Sales.
My cousin Betty from Betty Morton Auto Sales, downtown right there in Paragould, Arkansas, for a great deal on a car. What's going on that hot lot?
We've got everything from vans, we've got mid-size cars, full-size cars, anything you want. We pay the sales tax. It's zero down, full financing for people with good credit.
Wait a minute, zero down?
Zero down. There's
Nothing.
Ozark Mountain Wrestling wasn't pretending to be something they most likely never would be. It was proudly local and fans appreciated it for what it was. By the spring of 1995, Ozark Mountain Wrestling wasn't just getting by, it was really making some noise. The main storyline of the show on Channel 8 saw heel manager Freddie Fargo bringing in outsiders like Cactus Jack and my boy, Rod Price, to try to take the OMW North American Championship from the promotion's golden boy, Colorado Kid Mike Rapata. It was a simple but effective territorial wrestling storyline, the hometown hero versus invading outsiders. But that's exactly why it worked. Fans really got behind it. Speaking of Colorado Kid, he's positioned as not only the promotion's big star, but the next big thing in wrestling. I get why he's pushed as the top babyface. He left USWA with Prentice, so there's loyalty. He was a young, good-looking guy. Not very electric, but a good babyface worker. His promos are awful, though.
Well, let me tell you, it's going to be a test to myself to see if I can stay here and to see if I can hang on to this belt. And Freddie Fargo, you better watch your back too, pal, because I'm going to get you before it's all over. And Jack, if you want to take something back to New York, won't you take it, or to Atlanta, wherever you came from, take it, Freddie Fargo with you. And don't take me lightly, because this is going to be one of the best matches that you've ever had. And I'm going to be the one putting you in that trash can before it's all over. Yep.
But Prentice believed in him anyway. I'd like to assume loyalty mattered to Bert. When Prentice walked away from USWA, Rapata walked away too. That kind of loyalty can be forgotten in wrestling, but it definitely wasn't forgotten by Prentice. As OMW continued gaining momentum, Channel 8 took notice. After only a few months, the show expanded from 30 minutes to a full hour. Suddenly, OMW had twice as much television time every week. For a startup promotion, that was enormous. It gave them more time for promos, for matches, and more time to promote their live events. And it couldn't have happened at a better time, because by now the company had accomplished its original goal. Ozark quickly took over Jonesboro from USWA, and the Jerrys were spooked. The success OMW was having didn't go unnoticed, especially in Memphis. According to Bert Prentice, USWA claimed that anyone who worked for Ozark would never work for USWA again. Obviously that wasn't true in most cases, as many wrestlers continued appearing for both companies anyway. But it was a familiar old-school tactic whenever there was a promotional war. Prentice also claimed that USWA sent Randy Hales to speak to his advertisers and offered them a cheaper fee to advertise with USWA. And of course he badmouthed Prentice to the advertisers while he was at it. But the advertisers didn't budge. Prentice had built the relationships, and they trusted Bert over Randy Hales. Before long, Eddie Marlin stopped running Jonesboro altogether. The town that had inspired Prentice to start a promotion was effectively all his. Maybe Eddie should have just given him the $40. By late 1995, Bert Prentice had established a successful territory from nothing. But Prentice wasn't interested in stopping there. He was already eyeing the next opportunity. And that opportunity was opening up in the Evansville market. USWA was beginning to pull back from portions of the area, including several towns that stretched into Missouri. Prentice saw the opening immediately. Rather than simply remain an Arkansas promotion, he would expand. But expansion required a new identity. The name Ozark Mountain Wrestling made sense in Arkansas. Outside Arkansas, not so much. So, in January 1996, Prentice took his hot wrestling action to the new home base of Missouri and introduced North American All-Star Wrestling. According to Prentice, he'd already been considering a name change, but it was broadcaster Joe Pedicino who suggested choosing something broader and more generic, something that sounded bigger. North American All-Star Wrestling wasn't the most unique name, but it was far less regional. The promotion's office remained in Jonesboro as Prentice left Ozark Mountain running with some local guys in charge, but the majority of the events shifted towards Missouri and the Evansville market, with Jonesboro serving as a weekly stop. With the move to USWA's backyard, the war with Memphis ended, not because either side won decisively, but because the circumstances of their battle changed. By 1996, Eddie Marlin was no longer promoting towns for USWA at all. Without Marlin in the picture, Jerry Lawler and Bert Prentice began rebuilding their friendship. Eventually, the two promotions started working together. It really is never say never in wrestling. One year you're trying to put the other out of business, the next year you're sharing talent. North American All-Star Wrestling soon featured numerous USWA wrestlers. Names like Jesse James Armstrong, Brian Christopher, Luna Vachon, Vampire Warrior, and even the King himself. By July of 1996, the two companies were even co-promoting events in both Evansville and Jonesboro. Ultimately, the fans won. Instead of choosing between promotions, they got to enjoy both together. But while things appeared stable on the surface, Prentice was already planning another move, because he believed something major was about to happen. The death of USWA. In 1997, Larry Burton took control of USWA, and Bert Prentice immediately saw trouble ahead. From his perspective, the writing was on the wall, and eventually someone would need to fill the void when USWA went under. Memphis has always had a strong, dedicated wrestling show. Prentice wanted to be ready. To prepare, Prentice shut down Ozark Mountain Wrestling, paid off all their bills, and moved back to Tennessee from Missouri with $35 in his pocket. He then moved the North American All-Star operations to Nashville in February of 1997. They ran several events in Nashville, Lebanon, and Springfield. None drew particularly well, but it was laying the groundwork. Ironically, while preparing to take over for USWA, Prentice found himself working for them again, as Lawler brought him back to help run spot shows and write the TV show with Dutch Mantell and Bill Behrens. After seeing Larry Burton firsthand and experiencing the drama with the Selkers, Prentice really started to work on getting his promotion up and running. I can understand why Prentice felt that USWA was on borrowed time. The company at this point was an absolute mess. I covered the whole thing in the USWA episode, so check that out later. Prentice started running more shows anywhere he could fit a ring, like the Stockyard restaurant under a tent. By the time USWA shut down in September, Prentice was ready to step up. On October 4th, 1997, NAASW became Music City Wrestling and held its first show in Lebanon, Tennessee. Originally, Prentice wanted to call the company Grand Ole Wrestling, an obvious nod to Nashville's famous Grand Ole Opry, but someone pointed out that Music City Wrestling would be more attractive to sponsors. By the end of the month, they were taping TV as MCW landed a late-night slot on WB36. Getting TV that quickly is super impressive. Even more impressive, the show was syndicated beyond Tennessee, reaching places like Tampa on Channel 38 where it followed WCW Pro, and as far as Chicago on WJYS Channel 62. The change of name and scenery also included some roster changes. PG-13, Flash Flanagan, Adrian Street, and Nick Dinsmore all became regulars for MCW. One of the most important victories for Prentice came off-screen, however. The Nashville Fairgrounds. For decades, the Fairgrounds had been synonymous with wrestling, but after USWA folded, management was hesitant to bring wrestling back. Eventually, thanks in part to Christine Jarrett helping open doors, Prentice secured the venue. It was a major breakthrough. By the holidays of 1997, MCW was gaining traction, drawing around 500 fans for their Thanksgiving and Christmas shows. The Christmas show specifically featured a spectacular bloodbath between Wolfie D and Flash Flanagan, a match that Bert Prentice admitted he didn't enjoy because of the gore, but even he couldn't ignore that the fans loved it. And at the end of the day, isn't the fans' reaction more important than a promoter preference? In 1998, former USWA TV distributor and promoter Bill Behrens approached Prentice with a proposal, joining the National Wrestling Alliance. At first, Prentice wasn't interested. From his perspective, the NWA was dead. It was important to the history of the business, yes, but dead nonetheless. But Behrens kept pushing. Eventually, he made an argument Prentice couldn't ignore. If they joined the NWA, then Colorado Kid Mike Rapata would become its featured star. That got Prentice's attention, and for a $250 membership fee, Music City Wrestling officially joined the National Wrestling Alliance. With the stroke of a pen, MCW became the largest promotion operating under the NWA banner. With that new allegiance to the alliance, the roster grew stronger and even more future-focused. Rodney Mack, Shane Helms, Joey Mercury, the Hardy Boys, all future WWE stars. In July 1998, MCW moved their TV tapings to the I-24 Expo Center. It was a massive building that Prentice only needed a little corner to set up the studio wrestling show. It was a clean slate to do whatever they wanted, and it was free since the Expo Center just wanted the free publicity from being featured and mentioned on TV. In the fall of '98, MCW started an angle to make Bill Behrens a heel authority figure, as was the style at the time.
Bill Dundee, the superstar, has come now to Music City Wrestling. What is going on? I told you we don't book midget matches here. I see absolutely no reason for this man to be here. Bert, this is ridiculous. Just another example of how you need a vacation.
From MCW Georgia, and right here we have him, the superstar.
Billy, hey, fantastic.
How you doing, sir?
This man is a legend in our business.
The momentum only grew for Music City throughout the year as they were profitable, running weekly shows in 6 states and averaging between 400 to 600 fans per show. It was exactly the kind of territory many people believed could no longer exist. One of the most fascinating realizations I had while learning about Music City Wrestling, that I'm prepared to get ripped for, was that by sheer visibility, the company may have been neck and neck with ECW as the third most accessible wrestling promotion in America, behind WWF and WCW. As the program gained more syndication, it became available in an astonishing number of markets. It was throughout the Mid-South area, Texas, Florida, California. It was all over the country. ECW may have had a better product and had the rabid fan base, but most of their time slots were late night, whereas most of the MCW time slots that I've seen were in the afternoon or early evening. There were some late night slots, but I don't think it was the majority. But it's fascinating to me that they were so close to something so different. Now, being available and being watched are two separate things. But it's still an accomplishment, especially considering where the company had started. A guy with a wrestling ring, $35 and a dream. The expanded reach of the show also coincided with a change in its format. Instead of just airing matches from MCW, they also started including matches and sometimes entire TV episodes from other NWA promotions. Bill Behrens was really focused on trying to rebuild the NWA brand, and Prentice didn't see the harm in airing other affiliated promotions. This growth led to a potentially life-changing opportunity. In November 1998, Prentice started having a series of meetings with TNN, the Nashville network, about bringing an upgraded version of the MCW TV to the network. Prentice felt it was the perfect fit. TNN wanted wrestling and were in talks with several other promoters, but this was Music City Wrestling, a promotion that already attracted the same audience as TNN. Prentice had about 4 or 5 meetings with network executives and even brought along country music stars with him. But as we know, eventually ECW would take the spot, premiering in the summer of '99. And the biggest opportunity in MCW history disappeared. It's impossible not to wonder what might have happened otherwise. Would a national television deal have transformed MCW into a true competitor? Or would the various pressures of a national television show have destroyed it? We'll never know. In January '99, the MCW show was rebranded to NWA Worldwide, probably to better reflect the new format of the show. That same month, Prentice would have a health scare in a very unintended way. While doing an angle to set up a match between Colorado Kid and Chris Michaels, Bert passed out. The health scare was part of the angle. The idea was he'd get carried to the back, the Colorado Kid would get revenge the next week against Michaels, boom, profit. But what Prentice didn't expect was a fan to call 911. With an ambulance arriving before wrestlers could get Bert out of the ring. So he went to the hospital where they did a scan on him anyway. And there they found lesions on his lung. They were biopsied and thankfully benign. Most likely just scar tissue from having pneumonia as a kid.
Ladies and gentlemen, last Saturday night I was struck ill here at ringside. Sorry to tell you, no, it was not part of the show. And I did spend the night in Vanderbilt Hospital, but we're going to beat this thing. They have found 2 large masses on my lungs, but we are going to beat this thing. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for all the emails. Thank you for the cards, the letters. It means a lot that you appreciate the hard work that we bring here. And I thank God every day that Nashville has a place on Saturday night they can still come see hot live wrestling, because no city in the world can say we wrestle every week like we do in Nashville, Tennessee.
While MCW was successful, it did have one major problem: the Monday Night War. While Prentice was running successfully, maybe because of the high tide wrestling was on, WWF and WCW also needed new talent. So they very often pulled from Prentice without much notice. A guy would work a show for him on Saturday and then pop up on national TV on Monday. Prentice specifically blames Jimmy Hart for poaching his talent for WCW. Prentice tells the story in his book about the Bad Street Boys: Shannon Moore, Shane Helms, Christian York, and Joey Matthews. Bert had major plans for the group in the summer of 1999. One day he got a call from Joey informing him that WCW was bringing them in. Prentice was excited for them and happy to end the angle sooner to get them on their way. Then he was blindsided. WCW wouldn't let them finish their agreed dates. The angle was dead, leaving money on the table that could have been made. Prentice said it taught him a valuable lesson: never count the money until it's made. Even after losing such a large crop of promising young talent, MCW continued to find success with a roster that included Jerry Lawler, Brian Christopher, Kay Quick, and Greg Valentine. They also started breaking their own records. In May 1999, nearly 900 fans packed a show headlined by Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee against the Fabulous Ones, Steve Keirn and Stan Lane. Just months later, in November of '99, they broke that record when they drew a crowd of over 1,300 to the Nashville Municipal Auditorium. The show featured Sherry Martel versus Leilani Kai, Chris Michaels versus Air Paris, and Terry Taylor winning the NWA North American Championship in a three-way match against Colorado Kid and Jerry Lawler. The show was arguably the high watermark of the promotion, but behind the scenes, cracks were forming. In May 2000, Prentice stepped away from day-to-day promoting. His friend and local businessman Mike Porter took over operations as NWA Nashville. The transition quickly became messy. With the deal came a TV slot on the local UPN affiliate. The TV contract with UPN was under Bert Prentice's name, which Prentice allowed Porter to use for his NWA Nashville show. The show also aired on America One. In late October of 2000, there was a falling out between Prentice and NWA Nashville. Earlier in the month, an investor approached Porter about purchasing a piece of the company. The only catch was Prentice needed to be bought out of his TV contract, so it could be transferred to Porter. Prentice agreed and was happy to get out of the business totally. He gave a deadline to be paid. The deadline came and went without Prentice getting paid. So Bert had two choices. He could let the time slot go or put a new show on in its place. At the urging of James Storm and other wrestlers, Prentice kept the TV on the air, replacing NWA Nashville with a new episode of Music City Wrestling that was thrown together in 48 hours. They taped the show in the afternoon and aired it that same night. The show survived, but the momentum didn't. At the same time, WWF expanded their C-tier syndication. Shows like Jacked and Metal replaced many of the time slots occupied by Prentice's show. Without television, the entire business model became difficult to sustain. And so by late 2000 and early 2001, the operation quietly wound down. Most promoters would have stopped there, but Bert Prentice isn't like most promoters. In March 2001, after both WCW and ECW collapsed, he launched yet another promotion, USA Championship Wrestling. Ironically, the promotion was by far Prentice's most successful and longest running. But we'll get into that story in depth eventually for DCW. On August 1st, 2021, Bert Prentice passed away following a lengthy battle with cancer. He was 63 years old. Pro wrestling was his life. He was dedicated to it. He loved it. Prentice once told author Scott Teal, "The only time there is complete peace in my life is when the ring is up and the building is quiet. At that point, everything is good in the world." Today, his promotions are largely forgotten outside of hardcore wrestling circles. But the people that are aware of them love the shows, and see promotions like Ozark and Music City as hidden gems, even if they are a little hokey. And that's the story of Ozark Mountain Wrestling, North American All-Star Wrestling, and Music City Wrestling. For a brief moment, Bert Prentice accomplished something extraordinary. He built a territory after the territory era was supposed to be dead. He constantly reinvented his promotions in the 90s to meet the needs of the communities where they operated. He got TV all over the country, and he took on the king. Bert Prentice proved that sometimes all you really need to start a wrestling promotion is a ring, a dream, and $20 worth of spite. Let me know your thoughts on any of the half dozen or so promotions Bert Prentice started. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by subscribing or finding me on social media, either here or here. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Watch wrestling, love wrestling. Thanks for watching.